we'll be reading, or I'll be reading, Path of Deceit. It's a great book by Justina Ireland and Tessa Grayton. This is a High Republic, a part of Phase 2, which is 100 years before Phase 1. Chapter 5. Marta's Day had lightened considerably when she first saw the Pantoran boy's smile. She'd been feeling melancholic after the mother's rejection of her plea to join the children the day before. Despite new hatchlings in Farise's nest the lovely day, and the pleasant tangle of the littles under her charge, she had not been able to unspool the thread of disappointment twinned around her throat. Disappointment and something worse, gnawing guilt that she'd never be enough, no matter how hard she worked, no matter how hard she believed, because she was Everiny. She didn't even know why her people were mistrusted. Nobody would tell her, as if she was just supposed to accept it, like gravity and sunrise. Everiny was not worthy of representing the path to the galaxy, except Yana was allowed, so it had to be something wrong with Marta herself. The mother, putting a hand on Marta's cheek, had tasked her again with the littles. You are the one I can trust with the sparks of belief in their young hearts. You nurture their understanding of our path, Marta wrote. Here in our home, this home that we share must remain true, and you are its caretaker. Will you accept that for me? Marta had nodded and lowered her eyes against stinging tears. The mother was a true avatar of the Force, existing in perfect harmony, clarity, and freedom with it. As she willed, so Marta must do. I accept, she whispered, and she meant it. Only the galaxy was so massive, so great. She knew she could expand to fit it. There had to be something wrong with her if she could not be content with the purpose freely given to her. Marta had tried to bury her uncertainty under soft smiles and softer hands as she led the littles to forage for beauty along the river and in the rolling meadows. Gifts from Donna into their hands gathered and prepared to become gifts from their hands to the wanderers of Ferdin. They'd settled at the available table in the market. The grandfather Ern and old Umbaran, who sold used droid parts, often saved for them. They did not wish to join the path, but they liked the way Marta preached about living with and for the Force. The younger of the Kalatunian siblings, loved grandfather Orin and sat on their lap for the first hour of gifting. The other children played games and tied bouquets and waved happily at passerby, only occasionally arguing as Marta welcomed everyone to the table, offering her faith in return. The Jared, a brown-skinned human boy, the oldest of the littles with Marta, teased Utalair, who was only 9, that her sun-yellow head tendrils were prettier than the flowers, and he wondered what would return to the path if Utalair offered herself as a gift freely given. Marta had found it necessary to separate them, urging Jared's little sister Vimian to unlatch herself from Marta's hip, where she liked to hide and imitate everything Marta did. Meanwhile, Tormak hid under the table, rolling pebbles into the square. Jezerlin would not stop bouncing, and Halasara, Simi, and Furlai wouldn't stop competing for the affection of the honey glider, who had hatched itself to Simi a few weeks earlier, taking advantage of the boy's willingness to share his porridge. The honey glider was a good omen, though the same bright blue as their brickle shell paint from eating the larvae of the arthropods. The antics of the little distracted Marta from the worst of her melancholy, but it had clung to her nevertheless in that busy market, as she felt like the only person in the entire planet who wasn't allowed to live. Then the Pantoran boy, he drew her attention suddenly and unerringly, tall and appealing in layered robes, simply made in colors not dissimilar to her own, with elaborate black braids, warm blue skin, a smile that showed off blunt teeth, and pretty gold markings across his face. When he caught her gaze, he came straight for her, as if he knew her already. Marta's stomach flipped. He stopped at her table, grinning at the children, but not taking his bright yellow eyes from her for long. His skin was nearly the same blue as the brickle shell, the gold vivid. She wanted to touch the markings, find out if they sneered or were inedible, or maybe just blossomed on his skin naturally, like tiny trails of sunseed. Then he spoke, and she spoke back, and he was from off-world. Of course everyone was, but he had just arrived from the stars, and something inside Marta pinched in longing. The Pantoran boy Kevmo was good with the littles, liked them, and he knew the Force. That was how he said it. I know the Force. Breathless, Marta thought this was why the mother had denied her again and again. This moment, this boy, for Marta to be there that day, she felt certainty bubbling up as if she would giggle. Then he abused the force. Stop, Marta cried. Reaching out, she grasped at Vemin, still holding her hip, and turned the human girl's face away, as if that could protect them all from what Kebmo had done. Marta, he said when the river rose, fell to the dusty ground. The grief freely given dashed at their feet. Shaking, Marta lifted her jaw and tried to be fierce. You do not know the force. He watched her mouth, wide-eyed, then licked his bottom lip. Marta knew what had happened. He'd seen her sharp teeth. He knew she was Every. He would leave. That was for the best. Kebmo Zink used the force for a game. The consequences of unbalancing the force such as he had done could lead to the death of living beings, and he'd done it to tease a child. Marta swallowed her grief away and let indignation rise. She walked the path with the open hand. She would explain, the force is not a tool. It is only itself, life, light, everything that connects us, not a tool. Kebmo leaned closer, expression serious. It can be. We use the force if we can. Use it for the betterment of the galaxy, for everyone. How can you know you are bettering the galaxy when you cannot predict the effects of touching the force? Marta struggled to sound calm, mostly for the sake of the littles, who paid avid attention, eyes wide, antennae untuned. My training is quite thorough, Kebmo said. Of course I know the effects of using it. Suddenly all the flowers lifted off the table to hover delicately in the air between them. It is exact, especially on this scale. No one is in danger, he said, coercively, voice soft. But Marta stared at the trembling pink and yellow petals before her. Please, she whispered. This is a gift, he continued, slowly spinning the flowers into a gentle spiral, a rainbow galaxy. You believe in gifts freely given? That's what you said. Uh-huh, squeaked Jezelyn, then clapped their hands over their wide mouth. Marta squeezed her hand into a fist. More people were staring at them, including Grandfather Aaron. Kebmo said, being able to use the force like this is a gift. It flows through me, is part of me, and using it is like using my hands or my ears or my voice. She couldn't help glancing at his mouth as he spoke, and focused there as she said again, please stop. The flowers fell. Marta closed her eyes in relief for a moment. You can know what you do here, but how can you predict the consequences in the force? Use it here for nothing but teasing, for impressing me? The boy grimaced. Marta pressed on. This instant here alters the force, changes it in ripples, pulls it, directs it, and those changes change other things out in the galaxy. Who is to say that your tricks here have not set in motion ripples that will result in something dangerous, where you cannot see it? That's not how the force works, he insisted. Yes, it is, Marta very nearly buried her teeth. It is not to be controlled. Jedi don't, Marta grasped. You're Jedi. Kebmo paused, lips parted, and very slowly nodded. You do control the force. You seek to bend it to your will. I know of the Jedi. How stupid that it felt like her heart was breaking. There was Jedi on Jedha, and she'd heard so many stories of that great world. The different ways of priests and wanderers and witches who came together there at the temple. Jedi came from the core worlds, with their own ways that were opposite of the paths. That's not true. Kebmo leaned urgently toward Marta, putting his hands on the table. We don't impose our will on the Force, but you use it. The Force must be free, Kebmo Zink. It is for us to live in harmony with it, part of it, not using it. Marta clicked her teeth slightly, to keep from gnashing them, to keep them from crying. She would have known he was Jedi the moment he named his weapon a lightsaber, but she had always avoided thinking about them. He knew so little. Kebmo looked at her with something akin to longing, and she paused. This gulf between them was vast, though only moments before she'd felt so right and good about meeting him. Finally, the Jedi said, the Force is warm and bright. It is life, and using it, he glanced at the path banner, hand-painted by Marta and Erdal and the old waiting years before. Kebmo turned his hands over so the paler blue skin of his palms faced the sun. Using it feels right, good, like basking in starlight. The pit of Marta's stomach opened because she sounded like she did when she begged to go with the children into space. She shook her head. Give out the flowers, everyone, she said, reaching for a little Shimi? Same name as Anakin's mom. Fairly and Utale fold the banner. Please, let us go from here. The littles quickly grabbed flowers and dashed across the street to hand them to the sellers and buskers they knew. Finally final blessing before they left. Marta knew she was running away. She collected a pan of chips and credits and coins. Then they'd be given and tucked it into a small bag before giving it to Tormak for safekeeping. She did not look at Kebmo again until she turned to leave and said, Marta Rowe. She paused and deliberately glanced at him over her shoulder. Will I see you again? He asked, gaze intent, hands moving, flexing as if they could not find a way to rest. Every part of Marta wanted to promise just one more time to leave him with a last gift freely given, hope, but it was better this way. She said no and ushered the littles before her, never looking back. She had to bite the tip of her tongue to manage it. The sharp taste of her blood put her firmly back in her body. It took only until they were just out of the market, the littles in a chain as they walked, hand in hand, for Jessalyn to pipe up, My older sibling was force sensitive. I wonder if they could do that with the flowers. I hoped I would be. Not me, Jared said. It's easy to follow the path if it can't even be tempted to touch the force. That's what my mama said. Hellersa said, The weapon was incredible. It was pretty too. I wonder what it does. What's a Jedi? Urla asked softly, tugging at Marta's sleeve with bright yellow fingers. Marta paused. Jared took advantage by saying, Warriors. They fight monsters, I heard. Monsters? Shrieked Simi, startling the honey glider, who had once again hidden in the boy's red tangles. This was getting out of hand, Marta said. That's enough. She stared at the chain of littles and nodded hard. Come this way and I'll show you something important. They skipped and cheered a little as they fell back in line. Marta led them out of Ferdin toward the compound, but veered south to the quarry and construction grounds, where many parts of the Gaze Electric, the parts unique to the path of the open hand, not droids or hyperspace or shielding, were being built. Members of the path were using the bicklins to heat various metals intended for the giant molds at the edge of the grounds. Steam and smoke rose into the blue sky, and the ting-ting of hammers were like bells. Droids stepped here and there, hauling the glittering pink granite from the quarry, others breaking it up. There were piles of this thin black slate to be chipped into shards for the vast mosaic floor of the temple hall and the Gaze Electric. Soon it would all be taken up to the ship and put into place, and Marta would be allowed to visit the paint walls with waves of brickle shell blue. It was difficult to see the shape of the ship in these piles of stone and sweating people. While the ship itself hung in orbit, sometimes the sun shone just right and glinted off the hull, and from planet side it looked like a star, like every other ship, but it was not like any other ship at all. Littles, Marta said, leading them to a quarter of alloy buttresses leaning against the rise of a hill. Do you know what we are making? The Gaze Electric, Jessalyn answered, bouncing on their toes. That is its name, but do you know what it is? Marta lowered herself to sit with her legs crossed and beckoned the littles to array themselves around her. A ship, a temple, a sanctuary. The replies layered together into enthusiastic chaos, and Marta smiled. The intention bolstered her, helping her settle the trembling in her hands left over from that encounter with Kebmo Zinc. That's correct, she said. All of those things. The mother had a vision of this grand ship. A beautiful, vast place, large enough for every member of the path and many more. We can grow our family out amongst the stars, take ourselves anywhere we like, wherever the Force needs us to share our clarity with other beings. Clarity, Vermin said very quietly, staring at Marta with aquamarine eyes. Marta thought suddenly that she herself looked like this when she spoke with the mother, as if the mother could do no wrong and every word from her lips was like the word of the Force itself. Realizing Vermin saw Marta that way made her feel taller, stronger, but a little bit frightened too. Clarity, Marta said, and freedom, and harmony with the Force. That is the path of the open hand. The Force is everywhere, in everything, blazing through the particles of the universe, and it is not our place to touch it. We are not above other creatures or things. We are not above the Force. We are it, if we are lucky. Fairlight, the older Klatooinian sibling, frowned, his large forehead bulb shading his eyes. That is why that Jedi shouldn't have moved the flowers. Marta nodded solemnly. He took from the Force, stole, abused. Even that alone is wrong. You understand? We do not take. We only hold our open hands. The littles showed their hands over, palms to the sky. When you are open, gifts freely given will come to you, as long as you are alive, as long as the Force flows through you. Simi put his little white hand in Marta's gray one. She squeezed. The honey glider pushed off his neck and landed on Halashar's knees. The Rodian grinned. Thank you, she said, for the gift of your friendship. I'll be your friend too, said Fairly's little sibling, coaxing the cute blue glider. Me also, Tromac said, all three eyes blinking fast. Marta smiled softly. She led them through the rest of their catechisms while members of the path worked noisily, the future sanctuary of the gaze electric surrounding them in comfortable nests. Yet Marta could not help thinking of the Jedi boy holding out his open hands to her, and how badly she had longed to open her hands to him in return. Alright, so now we're on Chapter 6. Chapter 6. Hey, that's a nice ship, Kor gestured to the skiff a few meters away, and Yana nodded. They were leaving later than scheduled, Trees having disentangled himself from a very lovely human before they could depart, and Yana's temper was short because of the delay. But even in her ill temper, she had to agree with Kor. It was the only other ship in the docking yard besides the Harmony, and truthfully, every ship looked nice compared with the beat-up path shuttle with its sloppy blue markings. The path wasn't as poor as it used to be, but hey, they still tried to keep down appearances. We should get something like when we buy ours, Kor said, lowering her voice and nuzzling nearer so Trez wouldn't hear. Yana stroked one of Kor's head tentacles and nodded. I have to learn how to fly first, she said, and Kor laughed. If Trez can do it, you definitely can. Yana boarded the Harmony with Trez and Kor in tow. They all wore the robes of the path, but underneath were their work clothes, Trez wearing his knives and Yana her slicer set. They would have to work quickly once they got to Port Heliop. The new Jedi outpost there was a problem, and there wouldn't be time to properly change. The smell of the ship hit Yana as soon as her foot left the boarding ram and she entered the interior. Lompomp incense. They burned it constantly, so it was a predominant thing any witnesses would remember about the past shuttle. As they crowded into the tight cockpit, Kor cooped Yana's cheeks affectionately before she turned her large liquid eyes on Chincy. How long will it take to get to Port Heliop? The mother gave me an unmapped route, so only a few hours, they said, excited. Strap in and relax. We'll be back in time for the naming. Is the mother having visions of hyperspace paths now? Trez sneered. The McCain's short head tendrils undulated. She may have traded them, Kor said, waving away Trez's sarcasm. I was with my mother in the caves and saw the mother's greeting a human who looked like one of those prospectors. Yana didn't say anything, but she agreed with Trez that however the mother had acquired the past was fishy. What else was she trading for or buying without telling anybody? But then again, Yana never stopped worrying because if she did, bad things happened. She sat in one of the chairs arrayed nearest the cockpit so she could watch Chincy pilot the ship. Did you check out the Jedi in the outpost? Yana asked. Chincy once they'd made the jump to hyperspace. She wasn't superstitious, but never liked to talk about the details of the job until they were on their way, and at some point Kor and Trez had begun to follow her lead. Yep, it seems like they're left on some mission, although no one is quite sure what it might be, so you're in the clear. You'll only be dealing with the usual security forces, which should be easy for you, Chincy said. The compliment warmed Yana, even if she wouldn't show it. Yana let her mind drift as the blue of hyperspace swirled by outside the grimy viewports, and when they excited a few hours later with a bump, she was the first on her feet. Kor stood as well and began to move through her cantos, the series of exercises she used to keep her body limber. Kor was unnaturally acrobatic, a gift from the Force, and on more than one occasion her gifted had saved all their necks. Her gift had saved all their necks. Trez's purpose was a little less elegant, and he also began to prepare, juggling his throwing knives and eyeing their sharpness. Yana somewhat hoped he would slip up and slice open something important, but he never did. The heated looks he kept giving Kor as she stretched and moved made Yana wish she had the force powers of the Jedi. She'd love to be able to pluck a throwing knife out of midair and send it hurtling towards Trez's eyes. They landed not long after leaving hyperspace, and Yana's excitement to be off the ship grew exponentially as they flew past towering swirled black trees. Marblewood, Yana thought, and adjusted her robes. As Chincy opened the door and extended the boarding ramp, Kor produced a bowl of brickle-shell paint and carefully drew the wavy lines across Yana's forehead before doing her own lines and handing the bowl to a slightly aggravated Trees. Yana smiled at the boy, showing her teeth. It would do him well to know his place. You have no more than 2 hours if you want to be back, in time for the naming, Chincy said, so be quiet about it. The children nodded before turning turning toward the boarding ramp and disembarking. Poor Heliop didn't smell like Donna, but the sharp scent of the marblewood trees and the fecund smell of the nearby forest were a welcome change from the heavy incense of the Harmony. It was the middle of the day, but there was little traffic heading into the main hub. Yana resettled her robes as she took in her surroundings. The trees towered over them, but there were a variety of small flowers nestled in and among the roots. Kor immediately went to gather them, picking huge bunches that they would use as their gifts freely given, a core part of the past recruiting methods. Give away flowers or interesting shiny rocks and get random passerby to listen to the gospel of a truly free force. Yana thought it was silly who wanted a handful of flowers, but she had to admit that it was also stunningly effective. It drew people in well enough that the children used it as a distraction for these missions. Once Kor had a good bunch of flowers, they began making their way into the main terminal in Port Heliop. The storefronts weren't much to look at. The outpost was little more than a place to land one ship and take a short walk. Port Heliop boasted a single lodging house, a single dockside tavern with a gleaming new server droid and a government office that oversaw the place. Why would they bring anything valuable here? Trez asked, and Yana shrugged. Good question, she said. Maybe the information was wrong. Chinchi have never been wrong before. Besides, the mother would have known this wasn't worth the trip and advised against it. The force flows through her. She would have seen something, Kor insisted, and Yana laughed. Maybe the force thought it was irrelevant that it was sending us to a place with grand total of 5 people. Their ruse wasn't going to work because there was no way to draw a crowd. Trez scowled and grabbed the flowers from Kor. We can still do this. Follow my lead. Yana and Kor exchanged looks before shrugging and following Trez to the dockmaster's office, the only official-looking building in the entire port. It irked Yana that Trez was trying to lead her team, but she also wanted to see what the McKinn had up his sleeve. His short head tendrils nodded and unknotted like they usually did when he was planning something particularly nasty. Just what did the boy have in mind? The door to the dockmaster's office opened with a quiet whoosh, and the human male at the desk looked up as they entered, a scowl twisting his pale features. Can I help you? No, Trez said, his step so light he basically floated into the office. His voice was like the softest jarring fur, and he smiled gently. But we can help you, my friend. The dockmaster stood, his hands on his hips. He was a stout man with brown hair and thinned to bare skin on the top of his head. He glanced at Kor and Trez with annoyance, but when his gaze slid over Yana, he could barely suppress his flinch. Look, I don't have time for this nonsense. What do you need? We were wondering if we could set up a giving station in your main thoroughfare, Trez said, looping his arms through the dockmasters and staring him through the door. Can I show you the spot we're thinking? We know we need to get your permission first, unless there is something else we should speak with. I'm the only one who works here, the man said, and Yana felt sorry for the poor bantha herder, especially when Trez's expression lit up. Well then, let me show you where we were thinking. The door slid open and closed, and Yana Kor remained where they were. The dockmaster's office was tucked into an out-of-the-way corner, a mistake to be sure. Let's get this over with before Trez returns. I say Trez. I'm going to say Trez. Trez sounds more nice. Trez returns to gloat. Yana said she had no desire to hear the McKinn brag about how easily humans died. Yana pulled out the small rig she liked to use to slice locks, a board salvaged from one of the newer lines of astromechs after a particularly nasty job on cleaning it. There was only one interior door in the office, and she opened it quickly. As the lock released, Trez returned, wiping the red blood from his hands onto the hem of his robe. Did you kill him? Kor hissed, her eyes narrowing in the agitation as Trez befolded his robes. The McKinn shrugged. That blood was shed for the path. I don't think the mother will mind. That's murder, Trez, Kor said darkly. It isn't what we're here for. That is not living in harmony with the Force. Yana tried to ignore them and ignore her own dislike of Trez taking such drastic measures. It wasn't the killing itself that bothered her, but that Trez was such a wild card. Can you two save it? I'm concentrating. Kor put a solid hand on her shoulder, and Trez leaned casually against the wall. How goes the slicing? Done, Yana said. Standing back from the door so Trez could lead the way, throwing knives in hand, Kor followed him and Yana took up the rear, sealing the door behind them so there would be no unwanted surprises. Beyond the door was a small anteroom, and beyond that was a larger warehouse area that looked to hold cages of confiscated cargo. The bins were marked with numbers rather than descriptions of what each one held, and Kor sighed. Not as straightforward as I'd hoped, she said, squinting at the labels. The shelves were high, at least 10 meters, and there wasn't a ladder or cargo droid in sight. There should be a master file here with the contents and dates confiscated, Yana said as she stripped off her robes and used the material to wipe away the face paint. Trez did the same. Kor looked aggrieved for a moment before following their lead, then piling the robes into a bundle they would grab on their way out. Yana went to the room's lone data terminal and booted it up. She was about to attach her slicer rig to the machine when Trez produced a strange trinket. The dockmaster had this around his neck. Do you think it unlocks the terminal? Yana took the small metallic object and inserted it into the front of the data terminal. It fit perfectly, unlocking the system. Rows of options appeared, each of them containing an item and date. This is odd, Kor said, her liquid black eyes filled with worry. Why would the Republic keep such precious cargo here without a guard? Maybe they trust the Force to defend itself, Trez said, with a smirk back to juggling his knives. More likely they have no idea what it is. Either way, I think I found it, Yana said as she scrolled through the records. Bin 5843. It's marked rare weapon, and the place of origin is ruins of Moraband. Hey, that's the homeworld of the Zith. Where is that? Don't know, don't care, Trez said as she walked over to the shelves. Kor, I think that's it. All the way up there. Can you reach it? Kor said nothing, just glanced at the shelves before running and leaping toward the wall opposite. She ricocheted off the wall, leaping toward the shelves. She hit the shelf a few meters below her goal and scampered up the side, a feat that both Yana and Trez would have found impossible. It was an impressive move, and as Kor lifted herself onto the shelf to perch next to a cargo container, Yana's stomach lurched. If Kor fell from the height, she would be grievously injured. Yana hated thinking about such things, but it was times like this that she found it difficult to work with her girlfriend on such dangerous jobs. Nothing bad had ever happened, but Yana was Every. Even within the safety of the path of the open hand, she had heard so many tales of the awful things that could happen when things were finally going well. It was hard to forget that, especially when she was watching the girl she loved scale a tower of shelving. Got it, Kor said, holding up a box that was much smaller than Yana had expected. The container was made of dark gray plastoid, and there was a curious locking mechanism on the front. Why is there an energy sink on the box? Yana asked. Recognizing the dial next to the locking mechanism, such a device was usually reserved for items that emitted a low level of energy, like batteries and other electrical components, not a force artifact. No clue, but it isn't heavy. Yana, can you catch it? Kor asked. I got it, Trez said, stowing his knives quickly. At Kor's questioning look, Yana gave a short nod. Let the boy feel useful. Kor dropped the box and Trez grabbed it while Kor leapt down, dangling from the top shelf for a moment before arching her body and flipping backward to land in a soft crouch. When she was safely back at the ground level, Yana deleted anything related to her search, logged out of the work terminal, and shut everything down. She kept the digital key though. It was Republic property, but that just meant it could be useful. Who knew what kind of lock codes she could pull from the device? They gathered up their robes and made their way from the dockmaster's office back to the Harmony. Yana was a jangle of anxious nerves the entire way, but there was no trouble. No one paid them much mind, and if they looked odd with their small cargo container and armful of robes, no one remarked on it. Once they were back in the Harmony, Chinsi wasted no time taking them into orbit. No one spoke until they hit hyperspace, and once they did, Chinsi left the cockpit to join them in the seating area. Well, they asked. Trez had left the box in the middle of the floor, and they all shrugged. That's it, he said. Chinsi sighed audibly. Did you open it? No, Yana said. Then how do you know it's the thing we're looking for? It was the only thing logged as being from ruins and a weapon. Yana said, do you want me to open it? No, Chinsi said. We shall allow the mother the honor. Kor sat on Yana's lap, settling her tentacle head on the Every's shoulder. There's something weird about the box. Kor's voice trailed off, but Yana could feel the tension in her body. I don't like that thing, whatever it is. Yana was used to this. Korra had a bit of force sensitivity, as if she hadn't been a member of the path. She might have become a Jedi, but her father hadn't been willing to send her away from the path to Ferdinand when she was younger. As was usually done with the children of the path, were found to have some sensitivity to the force. The artifacts they liberated often gave Korra a sense of unease, but the expression on her face was pained. That was new. Are you okay? Yana asked, and Korra responded by wrapping her arms around Yana and burying her face in the hollow where her neck met her shoulder. I cannot wait to travel the galaxy with you, Korra said, her words muffled by the fact that her lips were pressed against Yana's throat. Me too, Yana said, wrapping her arms around Korra. They stayed that way for a long time, and Yana told herself that the sense of unease in her middle was just the usual every existential dread and had nothing at all to do with the box nearby. Chapter 7. Kebmo found Master Zala easily, as she was still speaking with the proprietor of the lodging house when he entered. Her blue-white skin was a stark contrast of the fuchsia skin of the Thealine woman she spoke with, and she turned when Kebmo entered, bags of provisions in either hand. Jara, this is my apprentice, Kebmo Zink. He will be in the adjoining room. The Thelian woman had silver streaked liberally through her hair, and as she moved, Kebmo got the impression of age. He grinned widely. Well met, Lady Jara. A charmer, the old woman said, her scowl deepening at Kebmo's enthusiastic greeting. Kind of rude. I run a respectable establishment, she added, and Kebmo stood a bit straighter. Of course, Kebmo said, looking at Master Zala for help. He was usually able to make allies easily, but this old woman didn't seem to care for him at all. Did she fear Jedi as well? We should rest, Master Zala said, saving Kebmo from figuring out what else he was supposed to say. Thank you, Lady Jara, for all of your assistance. I will be meeting with the town elders tomorrow. She gave the old woman a bow of respect, and Kebmo felt like smacking his forehead. Why hadn't he thought of that? Jara's face split into a delighted grin. No worries at all, and if you'd like me to accompany you, I am happy to. Now the evening meal will be served promptly at sundown, so do not be late. No one likes late guests. Of course, Zala said, before turning toward the lift at the back of the room. Kebmo tried to give the old woman a bow as she scooted past, but her scowl returned, deeper than before. So he ducked his head and hurried after his master. Zala did not say anything until she had pointed them to their rooms. I got us an adjoining set, she said, and the door slid open. Kebmo walked into a small sitting area and placed his parcels on the table. Your room is on the right, although I was assured that all the rooms were virtually the same. The place was simply appointed but clean, without a hint of vermin or even dust. It was a rarity to have such nice accommodations on the frontier, and Kebmo's spirits picked up a bit. Perhaps Donna wasn't all dark-eyed girls who thought Jedi abused the Force. Zala frowned at Kebmo. Something happened in the market. Ah, Kebmo said, realizing he let his emotions get the better of him. Yes, I tried to make friends like you said, but it went horribly wrong. Zala sighed. Tell me. Kebmo quickly relayed the details of his interaction with the Path of the Open Hand, their ideas about the Force, how Marta had believed that using the Force on Donna meant that it's somehow being damaged in another part of the galaxy. That's not true, right? Kebmo asked, suddenly downing himself. The Order would know if the Force could be, I don't know, injured from overuse. Zala gave Kebmo a look that was icy even for her. Of course that isn't how it works. The Jedi have served and communed with the Force for millennia. If that was the case, there would be guidance to mitigate the damage. Kebmo nodded. He knew that, and yet Marta had been so convinced that he'd begun to doubt the things he'd known for years. I think I hurt her feelings, he said, shame washing over him anew at the memory. That girl and her people are a bunch of zealots, Zala said, going to the bags Kebmo had brought in and beginning to unpack them. Lady Jara told me their cult lives outside of town on their own compound. Really? Their ideas seemed pretty good. It was just the part about not using the Force that was odd, Kebmo said, thinking about Marta and her night sky eyes. I suppose ideas with the Sith also seem good in abstract, Zala said, her tone bland. Jara was quite adamant that there was something off about the Path of the Open Hand, though nothing so specific as to suspect them of stealing Force items. Kebmo collapsed into a nearby chair. I feel bad for scaring them, though. It was such a simple trick, and I thought the children would like it. Using the Force to play games with children, Kev? Zala released a soft breath, a dramatic sigh from her. Being a Jedi is not all fun and games. I mean, it could be. It seemed reasonable at the time to get to know them, he said, defending himself despite how it had gone. You cannot reason with zealots, Zala said. They follow a cult leader of some kind, a prophet supposedly. Lady Jara said, we should be wary of any who claim such a thing, especially as they are possibly involved in stealing from Hinestia. She finished unpacking the bags. Were there no durga berries in the marketplace? Jara said that Donna has a particularly delicious strain that grows here, smaller and easily enjoyed. Oh, I didn't see them. I suppose I can go back to the market tomorrow and see if there are any. Either way, Zala said, turning her full attention to Kevmo, there is something to be gained from learning how the path thinks. It's good for you to converse with those who see the Force in a different way. As a Jedi, you will find that there are many who hold ideas about us that run contrary to our truth and vice versa. This could be a valuable learning experience if you let it. Wait, so should I go find Marta and apologize? Kevmo asked. He wasn't happy with how they left things, but he also very much did not want to overstep. Zala gave Kevmo a cool smile before taking a small roll from the pile and a small pot of sweet cheese. I think the Force will provide you with the answer should you meditate on it. Kevmo groaned. He liked meditation. He simply found it difficult to be still for long stretches of time. But Zala was right. The Force always had the answers. It was just a matter of whether or not the answer would be something Kevmo understood. Make sure you freshen up for dinner. I get the feeling Lady Jara does not tolerate bad hygiene, and since she seems to be rather knowledgeable about the happenings here, I would like to keep her as an ally, Zala said. Oh, and she mentioned that someone from the Republic is staying here, too, an investigator of some kind. We need to tread lightly until we know who they are and why they're on Dalna. With that, she took her snacks to her sleeping quarters. Kevmo sighed and picked up one of the sun apples from the pile of produce, levitating it over his hand before grasping it and taking a bite. As much as using the Force brought him joy, it now also brought the memory of Marta's horror. Who'd have thought it could be so hard to make friends with another person who knew the Force? Chapter 8. The moment both suns began to sink behind the horizon, they began the naming ceremony. A quirk of Dalna's atmosphere caused the last rays to flare dark pink and spread in fiery filaments over the entire bowl of the sky. The sun opal deposits peppered throughout their river valley reacted, shimmering in the same vivid colors. The ritual grounds of the path of the open hand had been chosen for the prevalence of sun opal. The memories of the path from generations past had collected the opal and placed it in a wavering force lines at the west of the grounds, where it best caught the sunset. Marta and her community were ready when the waves lit up. The path faced the sunset, hands open and welcomed the gift of beauty. The spirit of Dalna joins us, the mother said in her lovely voice as she raised her open hands to the sky. With Dalna's spirit we live with the Force. The adherents said together in clarity, harmony, and freedom. The mother said clarity, harmony, and freedom. They breathed 3 breaths slowly, simultaneously as community. Then the second sun fully set and the brilliant pink faded from the sky. It took longer for the hard puddles of sun opal to fade as they clung to the light. The mother turned. She smiled at everyone. It was brilliant having her here, Marta thought, drinking in every possible moment. The mother spent so much of her time on the gate electric these days, despite the ship being not much more than a barren skeleton. From space, she communed with the Force in her great empty chamber, without the distractions of gravity or sunlight or cold. When she received the vision, she could easily communicate it to the planet. But that night, she was there to preside over the naming of the Ferez's 5 children. The mother nodded. The 6 elders of the path lit torches. They were pristine gray robes, loose and flowing with deep blue edging. Orange fire lit the thick blue paint covering the upper halves of the elders' faces. They were so near to the Force, mere waves would hardly do. The rest of the path waited in concentric circles from the elders on the outside of the smallest littles on the inside. Marta stood with the littles, though she was painted in her brickle blue waves and wore her dark gray tunic and robe because she was fully initiated. Ferez and her partners, Earl Dal and Fel X, came forward with their 5 babies shared among them. They approached sunwise around the circles of adherents, all 3 in the loose white and green of new parents. Just then, Marta turned to a commotion near the entrance to the ceremonial grounds. It was Yana and Kor, stopping quickly and hushing each other. They made it. Marta smiled at her cousin and waved. Yana nodded back before leaning into her girlfriend. Marta thought of Kevmo Zink, of how she'd wanted to touch his tattoos, and abruptly turned away from her cousin. She hoped whatever the children had brought back with them would be safe and that the Jedi would remain away. But she needed to tell someone she'd spoken with a Jedi, there on Dalna. The naming ceremony was simple. Fariz, Erdal, and Felix placed each child in the mother's hands and told her their names, and the mother put a small curl of blue on the child's face as she declared the name for the path. The names were the second of the gifts freely given by their parents, the first being life itself, of course. Marta listened, repeated the names with the congregation, had to whisper quiet chiding to Jared and Simi only twice, and bask in the company of her family. Someday Marta would either be out among the stars spreading the word of the path, or with the littles, and all 5 new Kesserin would be her students. Their family grew, harmony with the Force grew. By the end, Marta felt warm again, at peace with her place. The mother completed the ritual by performing a common song from the past history. She sang without accompaniment, and her voice lifted in a soft swell. Marta closed her eyes and listened to the lyrics describing the arrival of Sakar Road on Dalna, where she founded the path of the open hand on a planet untouched by war or pain, led away from his former priesthood by a vision of vivid blue light. It was a soothing story to Marta because she knew 2 things about her people. The Everneed, they were reveled throughout the galaxy for unknown reasons, and they no longer had a home of their own. Sarchar Road had come from their older known as the Guardians of the Wills. Oh, they mentioned the Guardians of the Wills, that's cool. But left them when his belief conflicted with their ways. He was outcast from them and sought sanctuary with the Force. Those things led him to Donna, where Marta and her cousin had also ended up, as had the mother, come from the core worlds enough years before that Marta hardly recalled it. The mother had arrived as a refuge, like the rest of the path, accepted the gift of their welcome, and slowly learned their ways until she had a vision, just like Sasha Road, of a blue light, but the mother saw the light in the shape of a messenger, a being created of pure force who taught the mother how to share life and listen and be one with the Force, so much so that the mother's small garden had bloomed overnight. Her harmony with the Force was so pure, it bled out of her and into anyone blessed enough to be in her presence. Because of this and her other visions, she was able to lead and guide the path, despite not qualifying as an elder. Everyone listened when she spoke, from the youngest little to the driest and most wrinkled elder. The song the mother sang ended with a hopeful trill, and everyone present said, bright and loud, the Force will be free. Then applause and laughter scattered, and the mother helped Fariz and her parents and her partners take the newborns back to the central garden for a simple evening. Marta gathered her littles. They trailed after, arriving before most of the congregation to serve with old Waden at the communal posts. Firelight and glowing green-blue vines gave the garden an eerie, peaceful air as the stars broke out overhead, and Marta smiled to serve food to her large family. She took a tray with the bowls to the nest where Fariz's family had settled with the mother, Vimian and Udalair helping with drinks. They bowed their heads politely before giving the mother and the new parents the sweet water and soup. Then Fariz asked Marta to remain with them. Delighted, she said, sending the littles back to the old Waden. She curled her legs beneath her and quietly sipped her bowl of soup, eager to listen to the conversation between the mother and Fariz. They discussed the things Fariz's babies required and how the path could help. The mother spoke of requesting some special protein supplements from their generous sponsor, Regnar Pullup, and Fariz smiled, saying, what gifts the Force provides we shall accept. At a break in their conversation, Marta leaned toward Felix, and the 2 babies curled against his folded legs. Their eyes were wide open, and they moved the frills along their cheeks in jerky little motions, as if learning the proper ways. Marta said, Is it unusual for the entire clutch to be all boys? Felix shook his head. He touched a scaly finger to the forehead of one of his sons. 2 of these 5 will likely mature into egg bearers, girls. That is the usual percentage. Oh, Marta smiled and set down her soup. I did not realize. The galactic basic is clumsy for Kessery, but we do not think of ourselves as girls or boys. Can you tell which of the 2 are most likely? Felix said no, and Fariz leaned toward Marta to say it is determined by a combination of the will of the Force and the child's will. That's wonderful, Marta murmured. She wondered what the Jedi would think of it. Would they consider how using the Force might change the future of a little baby like this? How could anyone consciously act in a way that might take from others? It made Marta's stomach hurt, and she was glad she'd set down her soup. Marta, the mother said. She glanced up, lips parting in surprise to hear her name on the mother's tongue. Are you well? The mother stared at her with piercing brown eyes, her entire demeanor still and serious. Yes, mother. Marta hurried onto her knees and placed her open hands on them. I have been thinking about your words and my place here with the littles. It is a serious task you have given me, entrusting me with the future of our path. I only worry about the greater galaxy and the influences it brings. Outer influences. The mother smiled. Perhaps your cousin can offer advice to you on such things, now that she has returned with the children. Marta glanced at Yana, who was laughing with Kor, both of them sitting with a group of adherents of all ages. 11-year-old human Jared stared at Yana with an obvious crush, and the Rhodian Halashira leaned against Kor's legs, her little sucker finger tapping on the Nolin's boot. They seemed to be behaving well enough. Kor's father, the herald, sat with them, his bare head free of the typical Nautilin tendrils. They'd been sheared off when he was young, and he was left with angry scars. But in his elder blue paints and gray robes, he gave off an aura both stern and serene. He did not seem to like Marta, maybe for some reason due to with her people, or perhaps merely because his daughter was intimate with Yana. But Marta hoped someday they could work together for harmony. The herald spoke for the elders and was the mother's trusted friend, the next member on the path to be understood, to best understand the will of the Force. She wondered where his wife Operi was. Kor's mother was often ill, though lately, with the aid of mother's visions and gifts of credit from friends like Regnar Pullup, Opar had been feeling better. Turning the mother's words over in her thoughts, Marta opened her mouth to confess about Kebmo the Jedi, but there, in that peaceful moment with the Kessari, she did not want to bring up any tense subjects. I will speak with Yana, Marta said, standing and bowing her farewell to the mother and Kesserin. The Force will be free. The Force will be free, they replied. Then the mother said, and Marta, please tell Yana I will meet her in my listening chamber shortly to hear what the children achieved on their crossing today. Marta bowed again with both hands open, palms up as if to catch the stars. She made her way through the crowded garden, eyes lowered but smiling at those who held their hands open to her. Marta brushed her fingers against their palms when she was halfway to her cousin. Yana looked up and grinned at her, displaying jagged, sharp teeth. Yana extracted herself from her grouping with a kiss on the corner of Kor's mouth, to Jared's obvious disappointment. He likes you, Marta said softly when Yana arrived, and they put their palms together. Yana glanced back and winked at the little, but then bumped her shoulder against Marta's. Not my type. Too hairy, Marta teased softly. Dang, that's kind of harsh. Her cousin laughed and dragged her away into the shadows. Here, she said, offering a small flask. Is this a form of off-world? Marta asked as she unscrewed the top and sniffed. Floral, a little sharp. She tipped it. It is, but it doesn't do much for me. So probably not you either. Yana shook her head in a mockery of grief. Marta returned the flask, enjoying the tingle of the wine on her tongue. Together they leaned against one of the buildings and watched the flickering light cast over their community. Marta lifted her eyes along with the sparks until they blended into the stars. She didn't realize she had sighed until Yana said, You really want to get up there, huh? Yes. I don't think you'd like being one of the children, Marta, Yana said, something low in her tone that made Marta look away from the sky and into her cousin's big black eyes. Yana took one of her hands. It's not an adventure, it's dangerous. I'm Everett too, Marta insisted. Yana snorted. I haven't forgotten. I can do it. People will disappoint you. What, the children do? What you do is important. Marta squeezed Yana's fingers, liberating the Force, spreading the path. People out there, they don't misunderstand the path and the Force. They actively abuse it. That's what I mean. People won't do what you want, even if you get out there. We go up against a lot of bad people and totally find people who want to be just left alone. But they're bringing their misunderstandings here too. Their ways, Marta frowned. The tingle of wine vanished from her tongue and she ran it against her sharp teeth. And they can be convinced and charming. Charming? Who's charming? Marta looked away out at the gathering. Oh, she likes low Kevmo. The mother remained near the Kesserin nest, surrounded by others. Elders with half-blue faces and a few other decadents and children. The mother glowed under the firelight and attention as she spoke, her hands moving slowly and gracefully as she invoked details of whatever story she told. Yana, the mother wants to meet you at her listening room to hear about the success today. Yes, fine, but Marta, Yana took her chin and turned her face back. Who is charming? Glad there was no outward symptom to express the churning in her stomach, Marta said. I met a Jedi today. A what? Andalna? Yana's spine straightened. Her hand dropped. In Fern, I took the littles to give flowers, and he was there, and I didn't know he was a Jedi at first. Marta clenched her fist. I just liked him, Yana murmured. You've never liked anybody before. I like you. I like everyone in the... Uh-huh. Yeah, sure. Marta huffled a little. He is a Jedi. He used the Force right in front of me. It was awful. And she cut herself off. And the memory of a colorful flower swirling in the air, the thrill on the little's faces, and Kevmo Zing's grin twisted all together. And Marta said, beautiful. Yana smirked, but it doesn't matter. No, that makes it worse, Marta insisted. How? Because it was beautiful, that it made it tempting. I hate that he used the Force in such a simple way, too. He was flirting with me. What an easy way to abuse the Force, to take its freedom away. Marta's heart pounded. She blinked several times to mitigate the startling dryness in her eyes. Listen, Marta, Yana stepped around to face her. Do you know what they're doing here? Marta shook her head. She was glad Yana was taking this seriously, not just teasing her about crushes. The Jedi don't go anywhere without a reason. There must be one. Yana frowned. She opened her mouth to speak, but stopped, glancing over Marta's shoulder toward where Kor sat. It could be a routine patrol of some kind, like those Pathfinder groups. But if not, well, we need to know. Why? We shouldn't have anything to do with them. We need to keep away from them, especially if they're here for some of our acquisitions. They will not agree with us that it's best to collect Force artifacts for safekeeping. Yana grimaced. We took something pretty high profile recently, but I don't know how they could have tracked us here. We didn't leave any trace, and we're just an innocent Force religion. We need to keep our distance, but the mother will know if they're in danger. I'll tell her. The Force probably has, Marta said, suddenly relieved. Of course the mother would already know, because of her communion with the Force. The mother already knew about Kevmo Zing. The Force would have warned her. If she didn't say anything, maybe there was nothing to worry about. But Yana shook her head. From what I know, the Jedi go where they think the Force wants them. Marta's churning stomach seemed to freeze. You think the Force brought them here? To us? Doesn't the will of the Force influence everything? Slowly, Marta nodded. I thought when I first saw him, Marta grimaced a little but made herself say to her cousin's boots, I thought I was meeting him for a reason, that it was the will of the Force, and why the mother wouldn't let me join the children, so I would be there to meet him. It was foolish, she whispered, to think the Force... Not foolish, Yana said fiercely. Silence fell between them, diffused by the chatter and laughing of the members of the path in the night-time garden. Marta thought about Kevmo's smile. Had he come directly to her as if they'd known each other already? She wanted Yana to be right. Yana said, he liked you too, didn't he? He was flirting, you said. You should invite him here. Marta jerked her gaze up. What? Show the Jedi the path of the open hand? The hard earnestness in her cousin's expression convinced Marta to take a deep breath and think. Show the Jedi the path. Introduce them to the commune and their way of life. Yes, convincing a Jedi would be an incredible feat. Imagine the ramifications for the path, and who else they could bring into their fold. Excitement began to replace anxiety as Marta imagined. Yana caught on and nodded encouragingly. I'm going to go grab Kor and meet with the mother, but you should invite them. They probably want to know more about the path anyway, so better for us to be the ones to reach out. What better way to convince them we're harmless, that we haven't taken anything or hurt anyone? They'll never find the mother's collection. Marta smiled. I will. Great. And Marta, Yana caught her hand again, it's all right to like him, but not to trust him. Be careful. I know that. You tell the mother about them and my invitation. That's what I'm going to tell my future daughter. For a moment, Marta stood rooted to the ground. It was dark, well into the evening, but she felt warm and ready. If she waited, she might not go at all. Marta hurried toward the commune's gates before she could change her mind. It was good to be eager. That would be smooth the way for this offering she could make the Jedi. The night was clear and the road into town dark except for the starlight and the rich creamy shine of the rising moon. Marta didn't take her time looking for fallen leaves and feathers, but moved with purpose toward the glow of the Ferdin. If she brought a Jedi into the path, the mother would have to recognize her contributions as a proper messenger, as someone best suited to go out into the galaxy for crossing of her own. Even if she wasn't allowed to help with the liberations, maybe she'd earn a place on the Gaze Electric when it was finally ready, and thought Marta did not want to dwell on it. She knew the idea of Kebmo Zink specifically joining the path appealed to her, not because he was a Jedi who needed to change his relationship to the Force for the good of the galaxy, but because she imagined how fantastic he would be in the path, putting that smile to better use, and she wanted to see him again. As she reached the edge of town, Marta pressed wisps of her hair behind her ears, and smoothed her gray robes. They were slightly nicer than she had worn to town earlier, in honor of the naming ceremony, but hardly pretty. It didn't matter. Only the will of the Force and her harmony with it mattered. The town was bright and awake. Still, despite the nighttime, half the market remained open for people who couldn't make it until evening. The booths livelier and somehow even more welcoming with pastel lights, some playing tiny music. There were only 2 places in Vernon with rooms to let, and Marta went first to the one nearest the spaceport. She had to pass through the only market and the main square, bright as day. The boarding house was run by an old Thelian woman, path tended to avoid, and vice versa. Marta reached the 2-story building, windows glowing soft blue, and touched the panels to alert the residents. For a moment, no reply came, and Marta resisted, triggering the alert again. Suddenly, the door slid open with barely a creak, and Jara, the Thelian woman, glared at Marta. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled back from the horns on the sides of her face, and the smell of rich gravy drifted out from the warm inside. Jara put her fists on her hips. What does the path want with me? Marta opened her hands, palms up, and bowed. I would like to speak with Kebmo Zink of the Jedi. Jara snorted. I knew it. He's at the evening meal. The old man said it like Marta was interpreting a vital diplomatic event. She lowered her eyes and said softly, it will only take a moment, please. Fine, come in. Marta followed the Thelian through a sitting room and to the threshold of a dining room with a long table and polished benches. A hovering chandelier bobbed and whirled with happy, bright light. Marta, Kebmo said, standing from the bench fast enough that he knocked his thighs into the table, rattling everything. The tall woman beside him seemed to be made of ice, but she wore similar robes and gave him a quick look before turning her calm to gaze to Marta. There were 2 other guests in the room, a broad-shouldered human with pasty skin and goggles pushed up on his hair on a nondescript brown-skinned human Marta could tell nothing else about in her quick glance. Before anyone could keep talking, Marta held up her palms again and kept her gaze on the tabletop. They were eating a barfish gelatin and that gleamed with thin white gravy. She said, I am here from the path of the open hand to invite the Jedi Kebmo Zink to visit our compound while he is here on Dalna. Silence stretched for a moment, and Marta wished to glance up but couldn't bring herself to risk it. Marta, Kebmo said, tentatively before he was interrupted by a new voice. We accept. Marta did look up then. The icy Sokian Jedi smiled at her. It was nothing like Kebmo's smile, but soothing and peaceful, and Marta was no longer intimidated by the older Jedi. Good, she breathed, and then fled without looking at Kebmo. Alright, we're going to end there at chapter 9.